Welcome to the AI Surge podcast, where we explore how AI is shaping industries and accelerating innovation. I'm your host, Surj Uppal, and today I'd like to welcome everyone to Jordan Cronenberger, owner and operator of Big John's Auto of Denver, Colorado. Jordan, pleasure to meet you today.
Thank you so much for having me on. Pleasure to meet you as well.
I'm looking forward to a great conversation. So Jordan, please start with telling me a little bit about the company and who is Big John, and tell me about a little bit more about Big John's Auto.
So Big John's Auto was a car dealership that my dad started in the early 1990s in Longmont, Colorado, which is about 30 minutes north of Denver, a kind of a smaller suburb. And he owned and operated that dealership all the way up until right after 9/11. Once that happened, the car business kind of got shaken up, and there was a lot of financial difficulties after that time period that put a lot of dealers out of business. So I grew up as a lot tech, cleaning cars, driving cars, just that's all I did. And then I went to college. I graduated in 2008. And if you remember what the economy was like in 2008, it was not very good. So I quickly found out that my degree was literally almost worthless for a decent job. So of course, I go back to the car business. At this point, the original Big John's had been closed. So I went into the franchise world, and I just worked my way from the top almost to the bottom, from the bottom all the way to the top. And, I was in the corporate new car world for many, many years, and then woke up one day and said, I just don't like this anymore. And then we reopened Big John's a second time almost 7 years ago. And thankfully, we're still here today.
Wow, that's a great story about kind of overcoming a couple of obstacles. One is with 9/11, and then the other one with the 2008 financial crisis. Persistence pays off, huh?
No question. It was, just a different world, right? The automotive lending constantly changes, and what works today might not work in 6 months. And so the one thing that I always either I get reminded, or I remind myself that the moment that I think that I have the car business figured out, I get reminded that I know absolutely nothing. There's never a straight path. It's always a winding river. And, you just constantly have to make adjustments. And, especially with social media and with AI, if you're a dealer and you don't use social media and AI, I'm just the firm believer that you are truly going to get left in the dust. For example, I opened up a TikTok account about a year ago. And if you would have told me that, we would do a sizable amount of business every month based on the TikTok videos that I do, I would have said, this is an absolute waste of time. This is just ridiculous, right? This is no way going to sell cars more than Car Gurus or Auto Trader, the typical car websites. But I make anywhere from 5 to 10 videos Monday through Saturday. And realistically, we're probably pretty close to about 40% of every, deal. And then probably close to, realistically, half of my deals come from social media now, from videos that I do. And there's this trend that I'm seeing where social media, and not Facebook so much or Instagram, but specifically for me, is TikTok. And so the more videos that I make, the more random people just show up and say, yeah, we saw this on TikTok a week ago or this morning. So it's just interesting because at this point for my independent used car dealership, TikTok is life and death now, which a year ago I'd have said that's impossible. So social media is huge. But of course, there's a way to do social media, right? And I never really had the best luck. Obviously the cars are posted on Facebook Marketplace and you get a lot of fairly low quality leads that way. But social media, TikTok specifically, if you're a dealer not using it, you're missing the boat. You truly will sell a lot of cars, and it's at the end of the day pretty low effort.
So Jordan, what are you finding? Well, two questions related to that. Is there a specific demographic that comes in off of TikTok? And if so, what are they resonating with? Is it the used cars? Is it the financing? Is it the history?
I do a video on every new car that we get. I do a 1 or 2 minute walk around and just highlight the car. And then I do quite a few videos on tips for buying a car and doing repairs and maintenance and finance. But it's amazing. You would think it would be one segment of the population that would come in based on these videos, but I get grandmas and grandpas. I get 18-year-old kids. I get it's just across the board. That's what's so interesting about it, is it's not one demographic that I can pinpoint. Now, one thing for my dealership where we're located, we have a very, very large Hispanic population. So, I speak so Spanish, right? But all of my employees speak Spanish. And realistically, month in and month out, it's probably 65% of every deal that we do is in Spanish. And, that's where we find a lot of those people as well. So it's a very wide net. And I truly don't have the exact answer on the demographic, but I just know that it brings in people from all walks of life. And of course, it's free,
So that's
right? Or I mean, it's
yeah, totally. Free is a good price. So that's one trend that you're seeing, with the power of social media and in this case, one specific social media. What other trends have you seen evolve in this space in the last little while?
First and foremost is going to be the amount. There's always, people out there that don't have good credit, right? That's never going to go away. But, we've seen a huge influx in obviously repos, very, very bad credit. So it's been challenging to say the least, when you've got, people that are, making minimum wage or close to that to be able to budget for a car. The financing part of it has been challenging. Do realistically every month we're probably at about 50% subprime. We do a lot of good credit union type deals as well, probably about 20% cash, but we do a lot of subprime. With my majority of my customers being Hispanic, we do have a lot of people that have ITINs, work for cash. So you've got to have financing sources, which we do have a couple of banks that will do that. But, every situation's different. And I would say overall, people are struggling, and you got to get creative, and, people have to, of course, because sometimes, they come in and they want, a nice truck, and they have to leave with the Toyota Corolla, so it's one of those things where the banks tighten up and then they loosen up, and then they tighten up and they, so it just never changes, but the bad credit though has definitely been on the rise. And, I've spoken to quite a few lenders over the last couple of months, and, some of the credit unions that I deal with, right now have record high repossessions at the moment. So it's an interesting time. A lot of bankruptcies as well lately that I've seen.
So it's so interesting. Hey, in the auto industry, you really have to work each deal individually, don't you? And kind of weigh the risk reward, the profit margin, the flexibility that a customer needs. To your point, yeah, it's never a dull day, huh?
No, there's never a day that, is the same thing. And, another thing too, being that, I'm an independent dealer. We have one location. So I did dabble in buy here, pay here for about 2 years. And I actually did all things considered, we actually did pretty well with it. But the reality is, times are so turbulent financially for people that, we went away from the buy here, pay here market about 4 years ago. And, I've got the equivalent banks that will almost do buy here, pay here. But one thing that I've noticed as well, which every deal you do, you have to make a decision if you want to even make the deal. But I've had quite a few first payment defaults. So I'm an independent dealer. We sell a $20,000 car, people finance it, and they don't make that first payment. I get reassigned the contract. I have to go find the car, and it's up to me, right? And a lot of times you don't find the car, or you do, but it's not in good shape, so you're exactly right. Every deal completely stands on its own merit, and no two deals are ever the same.
So, Jordan, when you're kind of in the store, is every day different, or do you have a typical day? And if you do, what does that look like for you?
Yeah, I mean, every day is different. It just depends on which car is broken for that day, right? Which surprise you're going to get for that day. Th- and it's one of those things, right? It's like, people always ask me, what's the best time of the year? What's the best month of the year? And the truth is, it changes all the time. There's some years where we get a really good tax return season. And then there's some years where it's like non-existent. We just finished December, one of the best Decembers I've ever had in 7 years, the best December we've ever had. And I don't understand the reason why. I mean, we had a good selection of cars and we got some new finance sources, but it's so sporadic. And which is why I said, the moment you think you got it figured out, you get reminded that there's a lot of luck that goes into the car business. I'm a firm believer of that. You obviously have to be prepared. And there's a lot of stuff that goes into making a vehicle to where it's able to be posted online, right? But there's a lot of luck in the car business, though. There really is. You can manage this business, of course, on spreadsheets. When I was in the new car business, it was just 24/7 spreadsheets and matrix, and which you can do that for sure. But there is an element of luck that goes into this. And the other thing, too, even with all the technology, even with all the advancements, in social media and AI and everything, at the end of the day, people still want to do business with somebody that they can connect with and somebody that they feel like they can trust. The social media is great and the all the, electronic communication, but at the end of the day, people truly want to connect with somebody and feel comfortable and safe. Like, okay, I'm going to be signing up for a $400 a month payment for the next 5 years. Does this seem like a place or, a person I can trust? So, we have a lot of repeat and referral type business, which is, you were in the car business, that's the best business that you can get in the car business is people that you already know, people that refer you. There's a level of trust that you just can't replicate. That's really, really what I strive for. I pay pretty good referral fees. I do all kinds of stuff for people that have bought or referred back to us. And it pays every month. And I've got different demographics of people. There's a lot of different people in Denver. There's a large population of people from Russia, Venezuela, Brazil, Senegal, Africa. I've got a huge group of customers from there. So it's like a melting pot, truly. And what works for one transaction doesn't work for the next one. And we do all of our details in-house. We do all of our own repairs in-house. I don't do really repairs off the street for people, although we get asked all the time just because we're always so backed up. But a typical day for me, we come in, obviously you got to open your lot, make sure it looks nice and presentable, which my lot is pretty unique because it is a 6,000 square foot warehouse. And then so it doesn't look like a traditional car dealership, right? So I can keep about 30 cars inside, also where we fix the cars and clean the cars. And then I can keep about 40 cars outside. So we carry about 50 cars pretty consistently all the time. Every day is a new challenge, right? You've got employee issues. You've got bank issues. You've got customer issues, right? And no 2 days are the same, ever, ever, ever. And, one thing that I don't do, one thing that I so despised about the new car business, I can't tell you how many hours of my life were wasted at dealerships from 6 o'clock at night until 9 o'clock at night without a single customer in the showroom, right? You could shoot a shotgun and you wouldn't hit anybody. So at my dealership, right? Unless of course, if we have customers, I happily stay open late. But if it's, 6:30, there's nothing going on, we're out of there. Same thing on Saturdays, I don't open up until 10. And, so I try to make it nice to where my employees can obviously come to work, produce, be productive, but at the same time, they're not living the same lifestyle that they would, working for a franchise store where you're putting in, 70, 80 hours a week. And, I think that's why I've had such high retention. I really almost have the same people that I've had for almost the last 5 years. So I've got very low turnover rate. And, my employees are very, very high skilled. So really they're worth, my sales manager is worth probably 3 people. He's bilingual, he's great with people, but I would probably need to get 2 or 3 normal qualified salespeople to be able to replace him, so efficiency at a small independent lot is super, super important, right? You can't afford to make major mistakes because it's a different deal, right? When you work at a franchise store and you make a major mistake, you're probably going to get yelled at. You're probably maybe going to get fired, but what's the worst that happens? You lose your job and you go find another dealership to work for. When you own your own independent dealership, right, and you make a mistake, you personally get to feel that and personally get to deal with the consequences, right? There's no large dealer group to hide behind. There's no attorneys on call waiting in case you make a mistake, right? So you're essentially kind of in the ocean on a little life raft, and you better keep that life raft in good shape and keep it full of air all the time.
So, Jordan, you mentioned a couple of things where I get a sense of pride. One is the amount of referrals you get, and also the other one being the team you're able to keep together, with low turnover. Would I be right in that assessment? And is there anything else you're particularly proud of that you've accomplished?
One thing that I'm very, very proud of, and I think back on this very often, is the fact that we made it through COVID. We opened in June of 2019, right? So brand new dealership, nothing was really established yet. I didn't have a whole bunch of finance sources at that time. And then COVID happened, and then the state of Colorado essentially shut dealerships down for 3 weeks, right? And then the fourth week, they made it to where you could go deliver the car to the person. But for 3 weeks, I did zero business, right? And a small business, at the end of the day, you go 3 weeks with no cash flow. It's like, it doesn't matter if you own a hot dog cart or a huge no cash flow equals death, right? And so to think that we made it through the era of COVID is truly amazing. I mean, we were driving cars to different states. It was a very challenging time, but we definitely made it through that. And that is by far, I mean, by the skin of my teeth, I made it through that. And another funny thing too, when you're in the new car world, like I was for so many years, you're not essentially privy to the real financial information, right? You have access to overall gross sales and overall, basic expenses, right? But you're not managing the bank account. You're not managing payroll. You're not doing any of that stuff, even as a GSM really, right? Which I was a GSM for 3 different stores, but I didn't have, the level of knowledge that I have now. So I left the new car world truly thinking that I knew everything. I'm like, I've run stores with 40 salespeople, right? 5 finance managers, five sales managers. And so I'm like, this will be easy. So then I go to do it on my own and I quickly get reminded I knew nothing about managing real cash flow and really managing a business. And so I had a very, very short learning curve to figure out, this is a lot more than just managing spreadsheets. And, you have to do the car sales aspect of it. But in the independent world, you also have to run the business as well, right? And so it's so different because I managed some big stores and I never had to worry about that stuff. Truly, I didn't. So when you make the switch, you very, very quickly realize it comes down to one single thing, however you want to break it down, and that is cash flow. And car dealerships need excessive cash flow because what you're selling, they're expensive. They're not cheap. There's a lot of overhead. Even with cheap cars, there's a lot of overhead. And so you have to make decisions every day as an independent dealer, truly based on cash flow, right? And a couple of bad, not calculated decisions can land you in some hot water, which throughout the years I've thankfully learned and, figured it out. But, mainly I thought I knew the car business before I went out and did it on my own. But the truth is, my real experience in the car business began once I ventured on my own. That is the truth.
Well, it's funny. It really is. You got to work all the disciplines, right? From once you run the operation, the human side of it, the business side of it, the unpredictable inventory side of it, and like you said, every deal is a new deal. But we spoke about kind of some things that have gone well. It sounds like you had a fantastic December. Some things you're proud of with your staff turnover, low turnover, referrals, COVID. And for the audience, by the way, GSM, when Jordan refers to that, that's General Sales Manager. It's an acronym common in the industry. But Jordan, what would you say is a challenge that either you or the industry is still trying to sort out where you could say, we haven't cracked that nut yet and we're still struggling with it?
Something that I deal with literally almost on a daily basis. And there has to be a lender that can figure out how to do this. In Denver, again, we have a very high, huge population of Spanish speaking people from all over the world. And there's a lot of these people here that do not have social security numbers. They have ITINs only, right? And a lot of people, they have nothing. The crazy thing is that I have, all the subprime lenders that you can think of, but I've got 2 lenders that will do folks with ITINs. And a lot of these people, they have really good jobs. They have great income. They have big down payments, but the finance options are so limited that it's, we constantly get people that'll come in and they'll have $5,000 cash down, but they can't prove their income. Maybe they work construction. Maybe they, they do whatever. But a major issue that I have is that there are people that should very easily be qualified, but because of immigration statuses and stuff, you can't do business with them essentially. And we don't do buy here, pay here anymore. And so that's a major, major issue is just getting those people approved. And, and again, these people come in and they have, it's not like they come in with nothing. These people, they make money and they have very healthy down payments and, just the finance sources, the banks, constantly change stuff. And then you have the fact that cars in general have just gone up in price. And, if you look at what cars were, what you'd buy them for wholesale and then retail them for, COVID and before versus now, a car that I used to get for, $2,000, it was a decent, older car that could still be driven and somebody would buy, that same car now wholesale is probably 4 to 45. So the prices for everything have just gone up. Same thing with parts. there's a lot of shortages on certain parts for certain vehicles, or you have to go aftermarket. And so the supply chain on parts has been challenging to say the least. We'll get cars where we're fixing them and it'll need one specific part and the car's got to sit for a week because it can't be fixed. You're waiting on a part or the wrong part, which is very common. So, speed is the name of the game as well, right? Because, I do have a floor plan, right? And so every day that a vehicle sits on your floor plan, it accrues interest. So if you got a car, that you're waiting for 3, 4, 5 weeks sometimes for it to be fixed, the interest clicks away every day on that. The book values change, the market changes, the weather changes. So speed is another major, major, major thing. Speed can be life and death in this business, and just how fast you can take the car from a dirty trade-in to a good, respectable, clean, safe, drivable car. That's another major, major challenge, I think. And that's never changed. That's been a challenge forever. Another thing too, that's a very interesting thing that I was just talking about is the fact that we don't see a whole lot of young drivers anymore. It's very common for somebody in their mid to late 20s come in and say, "Yep, this is my first car." When I was 15, I was at the DMV office the morning I turned 15 to get my permit, the morning I turned 16 to get my license. But it's not common anymore. There's a lot of young drivers that just don't drive. So we see a lot of first-time buyers in their mid to late 20s, sometimes even 30s. Another thing too, I dabbled in electric cars for a while. So I know electric cars from the new car world. And, in the independent world, electric cars, it's almost like in order to be successful with them, you have to almost specialize in them. So I've tried electric cars that are under 8,000, 5,000, cars that are under 20, big SUVs, all these different things. And really what we settled on a couple of years ago, if you look at my inventory right now, pretty much all the time, 50% of my inventory is going to be four-wheel drive trucks that are generally 20 grand and under. It seems like trucks, in a sense, are essentially recession proof because people need them to work and people are willing to rearrange their lives for a nice F-150 or a Silverado. People are generally not willing to rearrange their lives for a 2015 Toyota Camry, right? So I always try to keep a good selection specifically of half-ton trucks and, a good selection of cars under 10 grand. It's a very common thing. People come in and say, I have $1,000 down and I want to be at about $200 a month, right? Well, to get there, max, you're going to be looking at a $10,000 car, maybe even a little bit less. So, I do sell higher mileage cars. Most of my cars are going to be 60-ish and above, but a lot of the people that I sell to will trade those cars back into me. We fix them and then we resell them. So, I even sell cars that are 200,000 and above sometimes. And a lot of these cars, they still run good. So I try to make the cars, it's this happy medium. I obviously have to have the cars priced competitively. And since I'm a smaller dealer, I don't have the expenses that a lot of the bigger guys do. So out of the chute, 9 out of 10 times, if I have a Toyota Camry, it's going to be one of the top 3 cheapest ones in the Denver metro area, right? But at the same time, it can't be a rolling piece of junk, right? It's still got to be a respectable, decent car. So that's the main thing that I focus on is sell them as cheap as possible, but still have this happy medium, making them nice as possible and, finding some common ground between those two, But another thing that's changing too is that, again, you go back to technology, these newer cars, a lot of them, an average mechanic can't really work on a lot of these cars anymore. You need special scanners, special computers to do things. And so, I've really kind of gone back. Of course, I could sell any kind of cars I could sell nothing but $40,000 and $50,000 cars. But why would I do that? The average person can barely afford $1,000 car. So, I focus on good quality, just pre-owned cars. And there's not one specific brand that we focus on. I sell a little bit of everything. But there's so many different facets with the car business, and then each individual manufacturer, they all have their own issues, right? Ford's got its own issues. Chevy has it. Even Toyota's, the almighty Toyota that people think doesn't break, right? I have problems all the time with Hondas and Toyotas, so it's like there is no brand of car that's immune from having major or catastrophic issues. It just comes down to each individual car. And that's the main thing that I tell people, you can have 2 vehicles that on paper bought at the same time, similar miles, similar features and equipment. But at the end of the day, those 2 cars, 5 years down the road, those are apple and oranges, different vehicles because no 2 cars are maintained the same. They're not driven in the same climate. They're not driven daily by the same person. So there's so many different facets that go into it. And at the end of the day, sell cars, but I don't even look at it that way. I basically am a problem solver and a person that helps people fix their problems. I never have looked at the car business as though, I'm selling a hunk of metal, right? Everybody's situation's different. You get people that come in that are newly divorced, newly married, just had a baby, their kids just went to college, just got fired, just got a promotion. So it's like everybody comes in with a different need to get a vehicle. And like I said, that human connection, that sense of like, okay, I can actually trust this person. He's not your stereotypical, slimy used car salesman. That goes a long way. And with my TikTok videos that I do, I don't use any filters. I just hit record and I just start talking, right? And I get a lot of people that come in and they say, hey, I've seen some of your videos. I saw this car. You seem like you're, pretty trustworthy person. I get a lot of business that way. Although there's all these great technological advancements and all this new stuff, which is awesome and it should be utilized, the human element of the car business, I'm just convinced it will never, ever, ever go away. And most times it's the most important thing. If you don't have good people skills, if you're not willing to take care of people, if you're not willing to, make exceptions sometimes for different situations, it's tough business. It's a people business at the end of the day, in my opinion, when you really break it down.
Well, it seems like the right balance is just that, being as efficient, allowing technology to make you as efficient as possible, but having that sense of being like a genuine, real human being that people can look to for, guidance. It is their second biggest purchase for most people outside of their homes, and they want to be able to trust you and do business with you.
No question. The crazy thing is, for a lot of people, unfortunately, a lot of people, this will be the biggest purchase that they ever do. A lot of people, and I hope this changes at some point, but for a lot of people, home ownership is not a reality. So the car they buy from me is their biggest purchase. And although we're in Denver's a pretty medium-sized city, but views are obviously extremely important, and it just constantly changes. That's the car business is such a unique business because you can forecast, you can go over historical data. I about, I don't know, a year or so ago, I was like, you know what, I use Chat GTP and different AIs all throughout the day, and I said, you know what I'm gonna do? I uploaded every single transaction that we've ever done to Chat GTP, and it had all the data, right? The year, make, mile, color, the customers, what type of score they had, how much they put down, how much profit was made. I uploaded all the data. And, I found out that 2013 F-150s never in 7 years have made money on those, right? 17 GMC Yukons, we've never made money on them, right? 13 Hyundai Sonatas, we've done great, right? Which if you'd asked me, I'd be like, Hyundai Sonata, right? So it is good to be able to use that technology, when you can, for sure. But I don't know, the more complicated I feel like you try to make this business, the less results you see. I mean, at the end of the day, it's pretty simple, right? You're selling somebody a vehicle that they need, right? Sometimes it's a want, but most times it's a need. And if you treat people right and you do what you can do, right, you generally just kind of get the loop of people coming back to you and people that speak highly of you. And it's crazy because, if you've been in the car business, right, this, but cars break unexpectedly. And I'll get cars that people will buy, and a couple of weeks later, it's got a transmission issue, right? Or it's got an engine issue. So you just never know. It truly is like predicting the weather. I always advise people, especially on these older cars, to get warranties. And a lot of times, if somebody buys a warranty, right, and they have a problem on their car, and the car, let's say the warranty won't cover it for whatever reason, right? A lot of times, I'll jump in and I'll help the people because I'm like, look, you bought the warranty, and unfortunately it happens sometimes where the warranty companies won't cover it, but by them buying the warranty, I'll jump in and I'll do whatever I can to try to help people fix it or trade them out of the car. But it's those little things that you do that differentiate you between the next car dealership, right? Because, in the state of Colorado, there's in excess of 2,000 independent car dealers, right? So what makes me different than the guy that's 2 blocks away from me, right? We're both doing the same thing. So it just comes down to how you treat and deal with people. And I really, really pride myself on that because I get a lot of, there's some other big independent used dealers that are around me. And I'll get a lot of people on a Saturday that will start looking at cars and they'll go to the big ones first. And then they end up at us and we do business with them and they buy a car, right? One thing that I don't do as well in the new car business, when you purchase a vehicle and you agree to numbers and you say, yes, I will buy this car, right? Salesman does the paperwork and you as the customer think, okay, I agreed to buy the car. The car's here. I'm working with the sales guy. Like, okay, let's buy the car and I got to get going. I got stuff I got to do, right? So it's a very common thing where in the new car business and a lot of big used car dealerships, you agree to buy the car, but then you might wait for 30 minutes, 1 hour. I've seen people wait 5 or 6 hours to get into the finance office, right? And people hate that. That's just the truth. They hate the inevitable feeling of knowing, uh-oh, I bought the car. Now I got to go deal with the finance guy who's going to aggressively sell me paint protection and theft protection and warranties and gap and right. People hate that and they know what to expect. So at my dealership, what we did, one person takes you from A to Z. And literally if somebody comes in and they say, okay, I want to buy this $10,000 car. We show them the numbers. They say yes. It's like on the spot. We do the paperwork and 5-10 minutes, I have you on your way. We offer everybody all the products. If they don't want it, it's like, no problem. Sign here. Off you go. Here's your temporary and have a great day. So speed is another thing that gives us a huge advantage because I don't make people sit and wait for the finance guy to be available like a lot of other dealerships do. And that's one thing that I get told all the time that people are like, oh, thank you so much for not sitting here and pushing warranties and, that kind of stuff. So people really, really like that. And they like the speed at how fast we do it. Right. So that's another big thing that we do is just make a deal and then get people out of there.
Jordan, you mentioned where you use technology and AI maybe to do some analysis on more profitable models than others. What other problems do you think AI or automation can solve for a business like yours?
One thing that's nice, for example, I used to have to manually post every car onto what? Let me go back real quick. So Facebook made a change, I think in 2022, where dealers could not automatically post cars into marketplace, which I don't understand why they did that. But I use a CRM called Dealer Cloud. And literally, as soon as I had the vehicle merchandise and activated it, automatically would feed into Facebook instantly. As soon as it sold, it would delete off of Facebook. It was the most beautiful, seamless process. And we sold a lot of cars from Facebook Marketplace. So Facebook changed the rule to where dealers could not post. And there's some workaways around it, but the automation part of it, it just never, some companies tried. I never had success with it. So I manually would go in and post every single car, which would still generate revenue, but it's very time consuming and it takes time to post cars. So I thankfully found another company last year to where all of my stuff gets posted automatically, but you can't post vehicles from a business page anymore. So all the cars that I have on Facebook, I have 50 cars on Facebook. They're all underneath my personal Facebook name, which Facebook leads are a dime a dozen, right? Generally a pretty low quality lead. We do obviously still sell cars from it, but I do not understand why Facebook did that. There must have obviously been some major revenue for them to do it that way. But man, we used to sell 50% of our deals every single month. So that was a major change that we've kind of gotten figured out. But another thing too, a lot of the lead providers that we use now, Car Gurus, Carfax, Cars.com, Auto Trader, a lot of the leads that come in these days, it feels like are much lower quality lead than what they were just, a year or two ago. A lot of the leads come in with no phone numbers. They only come in with an email address. And, if a customer goes to Car Gurus and they submit a lead on a 2018 Ford F-150, generally they're getting inquiries from multiple dealerships at once. And when you don't have a phone number, you've lost another way to try to contact those people. So again, that pushes everything back to TikTok, and the amount of people that see it are crazy, right? Because if you're a customer going to cars.com looking for a specific car, that's great, but that's a very, very niche customer, right? Whereas I sell cars to people now that were not looking for cars, that just happened to see a video I did that will come in and buy cars. So it's it's interesting because the ROI that I'm starting to see on the traditional lead providers, it's just the quality of it. And it's not one specifically, but it just feels like it's gone down, with the amount of spam calls that people get. I don't know about you, but in a given day, I'm not joking, I get 15 to 20 bogus calls throughout the day. So nobody answers their phone anymore. And so, just getting that contact with people is harder now than it ever was. You have to be willing to make deals through text messaging or messenger. You have to be, there was a day and age where dealers would not give you numbers, email or text messaging, or value your trade through the phone. It was like, you need to come in, we have to see it, we want you to be here. But now, I mean, you have to be willing to literally sell a car from A to Z through, with no face-to-face contact, and do the whole process electronically. And I think that, we used to fight that and do the more traditional way of physically getting people in, because in theory, if people come to your lot, the closing ratio is going to be a lot higher. But a couple years ago, I was like, you know what? I figured out how to do DocuSign. I can literally sell a car without somebody being in our showroom, and it's quick and easy. I can do everything from A to Z on a cash deal, a finance deal. And a lot of people like that. A lot of people don't want to come in, and they don't want to go through the traditional car dealership experience. So I will do that happily for people, or people could do it the old fashioned way. But technology has made people to where they don't, not everybody, but a lot of people, they don't want to do the old way of buying a car. And, they don't want to spend, hours or weeks or days doing this process. They want it to be quick, efficient. They pretty much already know what they want. People come in, they've already done research. It's not that common anymore where you get people that come in and say, we're just starting to look. I don't know what I want. I don't know if I want a truck or an SUV or a car. The majority of people, when they come in, they're like, I want an F-150 with the 3.5 EcoBoost, four-wheel drive, 17 through 2020 or whatever. So people, they do their research. So you get very educated customers, as before smartphones. I mean, because I've been in the car business long enough to where if you were lucky enough to be in the internet department, that was a huge promotion just to get internet leads. And now internet leads are somewhat in the sense of, they kind of lost their luster a little bit. But a lot of people too have gone back to not submitting any leads online, not doing anything social media. They just call the dealership. They make one phone call to find out if the car's available, some info about it, and boom, they're generally on their way that same day. And if it's the right car, they buy. So I feel like buyers' habits have changed to where, I don't know if it was COVID that did it or what, but I feel like people in general, not everybody, of course, but a lot of people are really happy to do everything contactless, essentially, which we do. And I know a lot of dealerships fight that and they don't want to do it because it does, it can lower your profit margins substantially, but I don't care. I do it. I just try to make it quick and easy for people. Hope that they have a good experience. Hope they can tell some people. Hope I can sell them a car in the future. Just go after good customer service at the end of the day, and not fight an uphill battle, right? People are used to doing everything now without doing this anymore, right? So although I'd prefer to do it face to face, you got to kind of go with the flow, and times change and things change.
Jordan, if there was one problem you could solve for your business, any problem, what would that be?
It would, the one problem that I would solve would be, the most obvious glaring one, and that would just be consistent cash flow. That at the end of the day, and there's obviously a million factors that influence that, but as an independent dealer, you don't have the ability to sit on cars for months on end, right? It would be, if I could solve one problem, it would be to just move cars faster. We turn our inventory on average in about 35 to 40 days, which is already pretty quick. But it would be just to turn cars even faster, which goes back to your process, which goes back to, just the day-to-day operations. But, when you don't have to, as a business owner, when you don't have to make decisions based on cash flow, you can do all different kinds of things. When you have to make decisions based on cash flow, it can lead you down a very slippery slope, right? Because you make a decision today that is the right decision, but a month from now, you look back and you go, that was a very, very dumb decision to make, right? You just didn't realize it at the time. But no, I mean, I feel like this tax season, I've got multiple people that have come in the last couple of weeks. We've already got them pre-approved. you of course couldn't file your taxes until yesterday, but I am almost positive that this year is going to be a phenomenal, phenomenal tax return year. I've spoken to some people this year that owe a little bit or get a very, very, very little refund back. And some of these people I've spoke to this year are going to get some massive, massive returns, biggest returns they've ever gotten. So hopefully, we can see some of that in the automotive world and hopefully just kind of get things going. But there's some people that I am waiting for them to get the money deposited into their account. And I've got two different people that I know of. One lady's going to get $6,000 back. Another guy's going to get 10. And two separate people, they worked normal W-2 jobs. And these people both told me on an average year, they get 800, 1,000, they owe a couple hundred. So I'm truly, truly banking on the fact that there's going to be some nice returns and, everybody can benefit from it.
So, Jordan, if there are others in the greater Denver area who will have nice tax returns, how can they get a hold of you?
Well, first and foremost, our website is BIGJONS Auto. There's no H. BigJohnsAuto.com. Facebook, Big John's Auto. TikTok, Big John's Auto. Instagram, Big John's Auto. And our inventory is always very, very accurate. It takes one day for a car to fall off. But also, if we don't have exactly what you're looking for, a lot of times I can try to go find it for you. And, also we do just buy cars as well. We constantly seek cars. I buy a lot of cars private party. I actually don't get a whole heck of a lot of cars from auctions. But, and to go back real quick, one thing you said, if I could fix one problem, it would be that, the price of cars could come down a little bit and that, as a dealer, you're constantly searching for good cars. And, the auctions have been very, very expensive over the last, couple of years. And there's a lot of junk at the auctions that gets slipped in. A lot of the green light cars that I get from the auction, which again, I only get probably maybe a third of the cars that we sell. I get a lot of trades and I buy a lot private party. But a lot of the green light stuff that I get from auctions is not green light, right? A week or two later, a lot of times major issues arise on a car that you're buying that you think is an inspected, good to go car. And, if you're a dealer, it's insane not to buy the 2-week guarantee because I probably return half the cars that I get. People reset check engine lights, they doctor the car up a little bit and then they run it through. You get it back to your lot, you get it cleaned, you get it merchandised, it goes on a test drive and it comes back and it's barely running or the transmission's slipping. So as a dealer, just consistently being able to find good, affordable vehicles. I mean, that's the name of the game, right? In the car industry, your profit is not made, in my opinion, when you sell the car or if you sell insurance products or how much you give somebody for their trade-in. Your profit, in my opinion, is based on when you buy the car. That's life and death right there. If you pay too much for a car, a month or two down the road or longer, you're just praying to break even on it or just lose a little bit. So it really, the buying of cars in my world is I have no trucks that show up, no transport trucks that show up that have got, cars on it. We have to go find every car. The buying of the cars is life and death. It really, really is. And it allows you to do different things and you just constantly have to evaluate it. For example, right now I sell a lot of Suburban, Yukon, Tahoe, Expedition, Escalade. I sell a lot of big domestic SUVs. And right now, if you look on my site, I think right now we've got 5 or 6 Tahoes, but I normally have 8 to 10. And the interesting thing is on the large American SUVs, they don't sell anywhere near what their retail values are. I mean, I sold a Yukon on Saturday. Beautiful, nice car. So 2020, had 80,000 miles on it, clean title, had a little lift, brand new tires, a very, very nice, attractive looking car. Well, I sold this thing for $34,000. The book value of this thing was almost 42. So a lot of these cars, if you exclude Toyota and a couple other brands, but the cars, they don't sell for retail, right? You're selling them for wholesale realistically. So if you think you're selling them for wholesale, think where you've got to buy them to be able to make a profit, fix them, cover your expenses. The price of cars coming down would be awesome. But, who knows? With this technology and these cars that change, it's just a constant evolution with advancements in vehicles. And, another thing too that I deal with on a daily basis is the emissions in Colorado. So as a dealer, if I issue a temporary license plate, I'm just guaranteed that vehicle will pass emissions. If I sell it as a towaway, then I'm off the hook. But If I issue a temporary license plate, I have legally guaranteed that vehicle will pass emissions. So a couple of years ago, the state of Colorado made it illegal to buy aftermarket catalytic converter parts of any kind, right? So it created an epidemic essentially because you've got people that will steal catalytic converters, cut them off, take them to a melting plant and get a couple $100s for them. But to replace those, you have to get them as OEM parts. You can't get it from eBay or from, they won't even ship it to Colorado. So a lot of vehicles that I deal with have the emissions messed with. And every year, the regulations in Colorado get more stringent. And so we constantly deal with emissions issues. And I have people that'll trade cars in, where the emissions have been cut out. And so obviously there's a good aspect to the emissions, right? But at the same time, and it's not just me, it's every dealer that deals with this in Colorado, I would assume in California, and there's some other states that are pretty strict. But emissions is a major, major, major issue. As a dealer, if I issue you that temporary, you might not register the car for 5 years. I'm still legally responsible. So what I generally do is I'll take the car through the test the moment that I get it. That way, once I sell it, there's no issue with somebody calling me saying, "Hey, I can't get my plates because it won't pass emissions." But it's definitely an issue that pops up all the time, and they're generally not easy fixes because you can't buy them used, you can't buy them aftermarket, you can't buy them through a black market which exists. So that's a challenge that dealers in Colorado definitely face. And another thing too, I sell this is a double-edged sword, but for some reason, which I can't figure this out, Colorado is per capita the number one place to have your car stolen in America, more than Chicago or Los Angeles or Houston, any of these huge cities. It is the Denver metro area. So I sell probably 5 to 8 people a month that have no need, no interest, no desire to purchase a new car, but their cars have been stolen. So the way that you do a transaction with somebody that just had their car stolen or wrecked is totally different than the person that's just looking to upgrade their vehicle. So there's a lot of facets that go into it, and Colorado has a major, major problem with vehicle thefts. And the truth is, I truly don't even know why, but it's kind of a double-edged sword for me, right? Because I profit from it. I do sell people cars, but at the same time, I have the same issue at night. I have to kind of take a gamble because I have a big 6,000 square foot warehouse and then a parking lot that's all fenced in. But at night, I kind of have to take the gamble and say, okay, I'm going to put this one inside, this one inside, this one can stay outside, so there's a lot of vandalism, a lot of theft. And that would be nice if I was able to leave my cars outside and not have to worry about parts missing and fences being ripped down.
Never a dull moment, is there?
No. I've had multiple times where I've had 4 or 5 cars stolen in one night. Yeah, one night. I had
Yikes,
5
they gotta
trucks
be
stolen
planning
on
that one
Halloween
out
of
in advance.
2021. Yeah, but
Well,
it's
I'll tell you
just
what,
across the automotive
Jordan, this
industry.
was a fantastic conversation.
Yeah, no, thank you for having me on. I really
And
appreciate it.
just before we wrap up, any parting words you want to share with the audience?
The car business is not immune to change like any other thing out there that exists. If you can, what I would say is if you can find, wherever in America you are, if you can find a good, decent, honest, independent car dealership, you can generally do good business, get a good deal, establish a relationship. And, a lot of times you can definitely save some money versus going to a franchise store. And, when you buy a car, just do your homework, get the car inspected if you can. And just know at the end of the day, cars break. They break no matter what you do.
Well, this is the AI Surge podcast, where we explore how AI is shaping industries and accelerating innovation. I'm your host, Surj Uppal, and I'd like to thank Jordan Cronenberger, owner and operator of Big John's Auto out of Denver, Colorado. Jordan, thank you so much for the time today. This is very insightful.
Thank you so much for having me. I greatly appreciate it.